Courthouse. This meeting of the Lincoln County Planning Commission will begin with a few introductory remarks. This meeting is being streamed live, and when adjourned and posted, it'll be available at any time at lincolncountysd.org. The order of events tonight will be as follows. For each public hearing, staff will introduce the agenda item and present a summary of the staff report. The applicant will then be asked to explain their proposal in further detail and to answer any questions from the County Planning Commission. I will then open the floor to public comment, first for persons in support of the application and then for persons in opposition to the application. When you step up to the podium, please state your name and address and speak into the microphone. Please limit your comments to less than 5 minutes. Lastly, decisions on rezone applications will be scheduled for an additional public hearing during an upcoming Board of Commissioners meeting. Decisions on the conditional use permit applications may be appealed to the County Board of Commissioners by submitting a letter to the County Planning and Zoning Office within 5 business days. Thank you for your cooperation. We'll first do roll call. Please state your name for the record. Commissioner Boots.
Todd Boots, here. Jerry Jungling, here.
Marlene Sweeter, here.
Eric Scott is also here. And I think we'll have one more coming later. We'll have him state his name when he gets here. Okay, now we're going to approve the meeting minutes. Can I get a motion to approve? The only thing, I don't know if we need to change this in the minutes, probably not. So let's go ahead and go ahead and receive a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes. Jungling?
Sweeter, second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. All right, now we're going to approve the meeting agenda. And just so we're all clear how it's going to work, we had last minute discussions between Toby Drew and I on how the old business and the text amendments to chapter 154 are going to work. And the way we left it in March was that we postponed the agenda item. And at that point, we had not taken a main motion on any of the proposed amendments or suggestions to the commissioners. And so by Robert's rules, what, in my opinion, the way I interpret it, is that still leaves us where we were at. And since we hadn't taken a main motion, we can still, as a board tonight, take public comment, even though staff has not advertised for it because we had advertised for it in the March meeting. So when we get to that point, I am going to open the floor to public comment, and then we'll move on just like we left off from our March meeting. So with that, can I get a motion to approve? Yeah.
So do have one request, is item number 1 on the agenda.
Okay.
The applicant has request for a postponement or deferral at this meeting for that application, or essentially remove it from the agenda. Staff is working with the applicant and there's potential that the applicant might be moving locations. So we don't really potentially might not have a need for this application in the future. So we just request that this time that item number 1 would be removed from the agenda.
You want that struck from the agenda?
Yes,
All right.
thank you.
So can we get a motion to approve the agenda with item number 1 struck?
So moved, Boots. Second, Jungling.
All right, it's been moved, properly seconded. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, motion passes. Commissioner Smith,
Yes,
for the record, can you say you're here?
I am here.
Very good. Commissioner
I,
Smith has joined the meeting.
I just want you to know, Mr. Scott, that I did observe the speed limit, primarily because there were so many cars ahead of me.
Very good. All right, we'll move on now to public input on non-agenda items. So at this point in the meeting, if there's somebody that'd like to speak on something that is not on the agenda, please come forward. All right, seeing none, we'll close the floor to public input on non-agenda items, and we'll go to public hearings, and it appears we will move to item number 2. Mr. Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This item before you on the agenda today, this is an application for a conditional use permit. If I can get that out of there. So this item before you is a conditional use permit. This would be for outdoor storage on the property. So the subject property, as you can see, is about 5,800 feet to the southwest of the city of Harrisburg. Subject property is Zone C Commercial. This property is within the La Valley Business Park. This is an established development park. This is one of the last remaining lots to be developed on the property or within the development park. So as you can see, this subject property does not have any structures on it at this time. It does have some existing storage on the property. We have had compliance issues with this property in the past. The applicant has submitted a concept plan with this application to do outdoor storage on the property. Outdoor storage as a commercial use does require a conditional use permit. So that's what this necessitates this application tonight. So the applicant did submit a concept plan with the application, proposing to do outdoor storage of RVs, campers, boat storage. And if proposing to put a 6-foot perimeter fence with an access gate, security cameras on the property. Anticipating that there would be no employees with it, it'd be managed by the property owner, which is Birch Properties LLC. As you can see, there's approximately 56 storage spaces on the property. Access would be a typical for this type of use, which would be 24/7 with some type of automatic gate within there. The applicant is proposing a monument sign, which as proposed would meet the stipulations of the ordinance. As you're aware, this type of use does not have any specific performance standards within the zoning regulations. We apply those performance standards with an application based on the location of the property and the use as proposed. So staff has had discussions with the applicant. Staff, through the staff analysis and the staff report, has identified that this proposal would be in conformance with the minimum standards for the zoning regulations. Staff does recommend approval of this application with the 6 conditions that were listed in the staff report. Staff did post this property. The applicant did send notification within 500 feet of the property. As of this public hearing, staff has received no public comments on this application. I did receive a call, though, this afternoon, or this morning, from the developer of the park. He was in support of the application, felt that it would be developing that lot would alleviate some of the concerns that exist within that development park. So essentially, utilizing the property will make it less of a nuisance-type property for the development. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have for staff. Otherwise, the applicant is in attendance this evening.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Brown?
Toby, did you say that this was the last available lot in the Klinghagen's development?
I think there's 2 more undeveloped ones,
Okay.
one of the last ones.
Thank
yes. Yeah.
Anyone else? All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Thank you.
We'll ask the applicant to come forward at this point. Tell us a little bit about what you want to do. State your name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, Matt Birch, address property.
You want to just state it quick for the,
Yeah, 27313
Very
La
good.
Valley Place, Harrisburg.
Thank you.
South Dakota. Yeah, I have owned it for about 5 years, and it's just been an open acre, basically. And so it has accrued things that it shouldn't from some of the tenants that rent the building next to it. And so there's been a ask to get it inside out, fencing for it up. And after talking to more people, there seems to be a need for some outdoor RV boat storage. And so, yeah, the whole property would get a fence, and we actually get more lighting out there, which would be good. So we're gonna try to put up 9 to 12 lights to light up that area, and then, yeah, clean it up, and, yeah, pretty simple concept as far as the development.
very good. Anybody have any questions for the applicant?
I just have one.
Yeah.
I mean, with the 6-foot tall fence, is that gonna be just an open chain link, or is that gonna have the screening in it?
Yeah, good question. I had it open at this current, I actually got it quoted to do the slats, so I didn't know what the needs were for that. But,
No, I was just curious.
Yeah,
since
yeah, it was
said
gonna be
6-foot
open.
fencing, so.
yep,
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Matt, you're putting 58 units in there? Did I see on
I mean, yeah, on that drawing, it was,
58 plus or minus, right?
yeah, yes, right around there. Yep.
What else? Commissioner
I
Jungling?
guess, the only thing I would ask when or if this how it goes through with the commission here is some kind of vegetation plan also. You know, weeds sticking out just, again, doesn't make it good for your neighbors.
Yeah,
That's all I can
that.
ask.
I agree.
Thank you.
You want to add it? You want to add it as a condition? Potentially?
That'd probably be,
Very good.
Mr. Brown, any weed or vegetation, that'd probably be in, code ordinance or for maintaining property, wouldn't that be?
I think what we typically recommend on this, and I'm glad you brought it up, is that we would do the slats on it, so it would be totally opaque. That'd probably be a better approach than landscaping on it. Because he's perimeter fencing it, there's probably not just too much space for that, so.
Sure.
I'd rather see you could add to the unsecured outdoor storage and say, unscreened. So number 2, amend it to say unscreened. So that way, they'll do the slats on it. So, does that make sense? And you can ask him again if that's okay, but.
Yeah, and are you talking about weeds inside of the fence? Well, like
Yeah, just weeds in general. I mean,
Yeah.
I can see the area has,
we were gonna also try to do fabric. Seal Pros with Nielsen was working on asphalt, parking lot, so I agree, no weeds,
yep.
So-
You know, anytime you put anything new, it looks great at first, but then
yeah,
you gotta keep it going after that too.
I understand.
Matt, this is kind of a dumb question, but if you're putting in 58 units, are they going to have hard surface all the way around that whole lot? Or
The
is
whole-
it going to be gravel or crushed rock or what?
Asphalt millings
Okay.
from Seal Pros, yeah, so we weren't gonna do a hard surface to start.
All right, very good. Thank you, Matt. At this point, we'll ask anyone else who's in favor of the application to come forward, please. All right, seeing none, we'll close the floor to people in favor of the application and open the floor to anybody that would be in opposition. Seeing none, we'll close the floor to public comment and entertain a motion for approval with the 6 conditions. Or any added conditions. Somebody would like to do that.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would like to change number 2 to no unsecured outdoor storage to screened outdoor storage.
All right, so is that your motion?
That is my motion.
All right, so we've got a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second it, Jungling.
Okay, does everybody understand what the motion is? All right, so we're voting just on that addition and that adjustment to condition number 2. All right? Call the roll. Commissioner Boots?
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Yes.
Commissioner Jungling?
Yes.
Commissioner Sweeter?
Yes.
Commissioner Scott is also a yes. So that has been amended. We will now entertain a motion with that change to condition number 2 to approve the whole permit.
I'll make that motion to approve conditional use permit
All right.
0059 2024 Boots.
Okay, it's been moved. We got a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved, properly seconded. Any more discussion? All right, we'll call the roll. Commissioner Sweeter?
Yes.
Commissioner Jungling?
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Yes.
Commissioner Boots?
Yes.
Commissioner Scott is also a yes, so congratulations, thank you. All right, Mr. Brown. Let's see. I think we'll move on. That was our only application, correct? All right, so we'll move on to old business.
So I can tee this up. So as you alluded to during the agenda approval, in March of this year, the Planning Commission did conduct a public hearing for 4 ordinances that were recommended by the Pipeline Advisory Committee that the County Board of Commissioners established. At that time, that committee recommended 4 ordinances and presented those to the Board of Commissioners. The Board of Commissioners, in accordance with state statute, remanded those ordinances back to the Planning Commission for a recommendation. And as mentioned, the Planning Commission did conduct a public hearing on March 19th. And at that time, again, there was 4 ordinances. There was no standing motion made. There's essentially 4 different ordinances, and I won't go through detail of all of them unless you have specific questions. But the first one would be listed as a conditional use permit. So this would establish, and I guess in general, the definitions and the other items that were proposed for amendment, those were based on federal definition regulations that are also adopted by the state statutes. So the 4 different ordinances, the one would be a conditional use permit. We call it a non-standard conditional use permit, meaning there is no real specific performance standards. It just makes those particular uses conditional use permits. The next one was a permissive use, and there was specific, what I'll call performance standards for that type of a use specifically. And the definitions were all the same between the 4. But the permissive uses would have established carbon dioxide pipeline, carbon dioxide production facility as permissive uses. And then the other option would be permitted special use would be that one there. Permitted special would have performance standards that they'd have a setback from single-family dwellings, churches, schools, and then also from incorporated municipalities, and those differed in size. And then a carbon dioxide facility would be a standard non-standard conditional use permit. And then the same thing in the RC districts. So I went through that pretty quickly. I guess I can go in more detail if you have specific questions about those. But they're 4 what I would call independent, unique ordinances. They have different standards for each of them. There's benefits and negatives to both, or to all 4 options there. But they do give you they're all 4 very unique options that the county could look at of adopting them. The most important thing, as I've mentioned before, and legal counsel's mentioned this before, is under the current zoning regulations, there really is no mention of carbon dioxide pipelines. So you're lacking really any defined use or defined regulations of what those are. So regardless of whatever happens, it's important that probably at some point in time that the county zoning ordinance is amended to include some type of reference to that particular use, which is not. If you recall from the public testimony we had throughout the process, is that carbon dioxide is really a liquid type. Your definitions that you currently have just reference gas. It doesn't really reference a liquid type pipeline. So as the chair mentioned, this was tabled, or not tabled.
No, it wasn't
postponed. I
tabled.
say it, I'm not gonna get that right ever, but it was postponed for this meeting. And the board or the chair is really looking for dialogue and staff as well as to how you want to proceed at this point in time. Again, each ordinance is very unique in its way. But with that, I'd happy to answer any questions you have for staff. Otherwise, look for direction from the board at this time, so.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Brown? And I think we might,
Yeah,
we might have more questions in the future.
maybe in a little bit, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, what's important to note too, for the record, is that what I believe the reason for the postponement is we were waiting for the effectiveness of state statute. And that has been referred to a public vote, which will take place in November of this year. So at that time, we'll know what we can do. And I believe at that time too, legal and staff are still working through what does exactly that bill mean for what our efforts might be for moving forward, so.
All right, very good. Thank you,
Okay,
Mr.
thank you.
Brown.
Yep.
All right, so where we're at, guys, and I'm just gonna go back on a little bit of the history. One of the things that frustrates me as a chairman of this board is the misuse of the word table. Because, and I'm gonna explain table and postponement to you how I understand them and how I've researched them and how parliamentarian people that are better at this than me have explained it to me. So, where you would use a table is after a main motion has been made and seconded, and the board decides that they really don't want to vote on that, and so they just table the main motion. And then it goes to the next meeting, it takes precedence, and if it isn't removed from the table and taken care of, it dies. All right? Well, that isn't what we did back in March. The absolute reason, you can go back and watch what I had to say there, the reason that I advised on a postponement, because all we were doing was postponing the agenda item. There was not a main motion made. So we postponed the agenda item. That basically picks us up where we left off at the meeting last time and where we left off at the meeting last time was I had closed the floor to public comment and was entertaining discussion, okay? Now, if you pay attention to a lot of our meetings, well, that happens with every agenda item. And then there's many times that we open the floor back up to public comment because people have questions before we make the main motion. And so that's where we're at right now. So in my mind, I don't see it any different than if we were sitting at the meeting in March and the board still maybe wants to hear some public comment and wants to ask some questions. And so we don't have a main motion on the floor. We don't have one that's seconded. So I think it's perfectly okay that we open the floor to public comment again, okay? People could disagree with me on that, and that's fine. That's the way I see it. That's the way I understand it, and I'd be happy to visit with anybody afterwards about it, but that's the way we're gonna move forward. And so at this point, I don't know, I guess what I'd rather do than just me say, dang it, we're opening the floor to public comment. I'd like to have a little discussion with the board. And if they would like to do that, I'd like to have a motion and a second to open the floor back up. And then we'll open it up to public comment. But I think that's where we're at right now.
I'll make the motion to open the floor back up, Boots.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved, properly seconded. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Very good. The floor is now open to public comment, and what I would like to, if somebody would like to come up and speak, again, we want to keep it to just these four ordinances, and what you either like, don't like, or what you think what you would like to see as the public moving forward. So with that, we'll open the floor up, and would somebody, if anybody wants to come up and speak, please come up, state your name and address.
Don't be bashful.
Anthony James Ventura, 47763 292nd Street, Hudson, South Dakota, 57034. I think the first thing that has to be done, since the citizens have done the petition drive and the voting, is let's let the people decide in November. Whether this passes or not, the county is still going to have power to make action. And so I think it's important to look at things right. These recommendations from the commissioners, I think, are a recommendation. That doesn't mean that I don't ask you to include changes. Some of the evidence I've turned in during those hearings was the Dayton Township modeling, which is now a board of adjustment. And so I think we have to include them in these discussions also. What was their reasoning? What was their thinking? How did they get to that point? And then these zoning things have always been what's fair for both sides, not for this direction or this direction. What is fair for me is what is fair for you. And we have to keep those standards and looking direction, especially after that Chevron decision, that you have the right to enjoy your property, every square inch of that, however you choose at any time. And so zoning is going to have to change to meet those standards. Thank you.
Carla.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight and
Can you
serving.
quick state your name and address?
Carla
for the record?
Lems.
We know who you are, but
Yep,
we got to do it.
Carla Lems, District 16 Representative, 47980 281st Street, Canton, 57013. I just had a few things. I served as a non-voting member on the ad hoc committee for this. I wasn't able to be at every meeting because, of course, the legislature was in session for part of that. I do know that on October 6th, there were residents and citizens of Lincoln County that had put together an ordinance that they took up to Toby's office, respectfully submitted that. We never had a hearing on just that, and I don't know how that works. But I do think they deserve a hearing on that, and just to hear from the people on that. I think it is represented, I don't know if it was the third or fourth one. Anyway, I have a copy of it here tonight, but the people do need to be heard on these matters. We've seen, I'm sure you've heard of something called SB 201. And we have a referred law before us on November 5th that will come before the people. The whole state is really watching this particular issue, and being Lincoln County is the third largest county in the state, I really think we need to pump the brakes a little bit and make sure we're getting this right. Since the ad hoc committee met for the last time, in between that time, almost 6 months now, there's more information that comes forward all of the time, more things to look at. I just think it'd really be good for you guys to hear more from the public on this. And like I said, all eyes are on South Dakota right now. I mean, multiple states watching us, literally. They're calling South Dakota the Alamo on this. So anyway, I just respectfully submit that we would take a look again at what the people submitted and talk about that again. So, thank you.
Thank you, Carla. Anyone else? Again, we're just trying to keep it to the four ordinances that are in front of us.
Hi, Sarah Stever, Lincoln County.
Address, please.
46850 276th Street in
you.
Lenox. I was one of the people who carried forward that October 6th ordinance. And so I'm also encouraging and reinforcing what Carla is saying. I'm seeing new faces here, and we would like the opportunity, hopefully, to get to work with you on a local level to make the decision about what's happening in our county. So I'm also working very hard daily, in fact, to bring RL 21 to a vote, hopefully a vote no, so that we could keep these types of decisions local. But I would also ask that we wait until that happens and the people's voices are heard. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you, Sarah. Anyone else? Nobody?
Sarah, excuse me. Sarah, you mean till after the election, right?
So I'll close the floor to public comment, and thank you for your comments, folks. Just quick comment. I guess what I heard in all three of those, and even recommendation from staff, is that we again postpone this item for a later date. So I guess what our options are right now is we can either postpone this item like we did back in March to a later date, either definitely or indefinitely. We could move forward and vote on any or all of these and pass them on to the Board of County Commission as a recommendation like we were asked to. Or we could vote on them and deny them all. We could do them one by one, we could do the whole group, however, I guess that's where I think now we need to have that discussion on how you guys want to move forward or what you think the best move would be. Commissioner Schmidt, I bet you have something to say.
Yeah, I would listen to the testimony that we've just heard until after the election. There's a lot of moving parts here. And I think it's premature for the Planning and Zoning Board to take up and to prioritize one of the five as the recommended one that they would move forward with. So I would agree, there are lots of issues here. It's a changing world out there. This whole thing is from the pipeline, they're in a flux situation by themselves. So I don't see there's anything wrong with waiting till after the people have had their voice. And once the people have had their voice, we've learned this is what democracy is, and then we take according action as a result of that. So I'm all in favor of postponing this thing until after November 4th, which is what, how many days now till 80? How many days till the election? 80? Is there some?
72 or something.
72? Do I hear? Okay. Anyway. we got
Whatever it
se-
is.
We got 72 days. We got about a little over 2 months to wait. So I think that's the better decision. That's my own personal feeling.
Thank you,
Mr.
Commissioner
Chairman.
Schmidt. Any other comments towards that?
I guess that's the way I lean, and that's kind of the way I lean back. We first discussed it, there's so many moving parts, and now with the referral, that a couple more months probably isn't gonna hurt anything, and once the election happens from national on down to the local level, we'll know what the people are thinking on it.
All right, thanks, Commissioner Boots. Commissioner Jungling? Commissioner Sweeter?
I would agree that we should postpone and wait until after the election to see what the people say. I think a lot has been put into the referral of this bill, and I think it would be good for us to probably wait and see what happens.
Good, very good. Commissioner Jungling?
Yeah, I agree with everyone else. We should wait. I find it interesting in a good way how when we started these proceedings, everyone was pretty on one side of the fence or the other. A lot of strong feelings. I know there's still a lot of strong feelings, but I like now how everyone's starting to talk about a little bit more compromise. Let's listen to both sides. Let's get all the information before just a hard slam no or yes. Going back to that too, I mean, this is our county, this is our land, this is our houses, and we want to make sure we have everything covered 100% right when we write this ordinance or rewrite one of these or whatever comes down from the voting. So yeah, I think we owe it, and moving something forward right now would be just a little bit too early now that we have more information.
All right, very good, thank you. Lastly, I'll just say, I agree with my fellow commissioners. But at the same point, I was prepared and sure wouldn't have mind discussing each one of the, these ordinances tonight. And there's still a part of me that wouldn't mind, starting the process now, but it's, I'm by myself probably on that. So with that, I will support that. What I'm gonna ask then, what we do, just so we don't have the same confusion and you guys have to get Robert's Rules by Eric Scott in December. I'm gonna ask that the motion includes that we allow public comment, even though I don't know that we have to, but that'll make staff's job easier, legal's job easier. And then I'd also ask that the motion is definitely, so that, and sounds like the recommendation has been December, but whoever makes the motion can make it for whenever. But so I would ask that the motion is definitely for a month, and that it is to allow for advertise for public comment.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
I would just like to throw this out there. Is there a reason we have to wait till December? I mean, we meet the third Monday in November. We could kind of get started then, in my mind, so
That'd be fine too.
I will make the motion that we postpone this and have the option for public comment for our November meeting.
All right. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved and properly seconded. I'll call the roll. Commissioner Boots?
Discussion first.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we can, yeah. Yeah, I guess we have to. Unless you guys, because you might want to amend the motion.
Because that's part of one of those sub-chapters in Robert's Rules. Yeah.
All right, any discussion on, do we all know what the motion is for?
Yep.
Okay, we understand that. All right, very good. Any discussion?
I would just like to ask council if that's enough time for him to know exactly what
Good
is
question.
out there and pending the outcome of the vote.
I guess that was my only concern is the unknown. So certification of the election would be the week following. If there's any challenges, it could be postponed, so you could not be ready in November. But that's worst case scenario, and I guess that's what I'm thinking of is if there's any challenges to any election process.
We
during
could
that
just
time.
postpone it again another month then, right?
But are we doing that again? I guess that's my only concern. That's my 2
Yeah.
cents, I guess. So.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Drew.
My comments were, what if we get down the road and next month or November, and we find one of these four we want to make an adjustments in or changing now that we have more education or more of the vote came through.
Yep.
So then we'd probably, November, probably open another committee to start looking at some of these or ask staff to write some of these with different wording.
Mhm.
So I just want to leave that out there too. We have these four ordinances wrote now, but it doesn't mean these are the ones we necessarily have to move forward with.
Well, I think that's 100% a possibility.
Yeah.
I think that door is 100% open.
Yep.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah,
want to
we-
get that out there in
We
discussion.
haven't moved on any of them yet,
Yep.
so they're all open for adjustment, in my opinion.
Me too.
So the motion's on the floor to postpone definitely to November, with the addition of advertising for public comment. And there has been a second. Does anybody want to amend that?
I think that, on looking at timelines, how many days it's on, what, the election is on a Tuesday?
You don't.
So that would give you, give you Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then the following Monday, we have the meeting.
2 Mondays.
2 Mondays.
2 Mondays.
2 Mondays, and,
Okay.
the election has to
Yeah,
be.
so you got
um,
some time. I mean, I'll pay for that comment. I was just saying, Drew, maybe we can find, never mind, I got my foot in my mouth, I'll just leave it
When are
there.
you going to canvass that election to certify that it's a correct election?
Yeah. Well, there's a canvas in there, yeah?
Yeah, there's a canvass after that.
Yeah.
I guess to Commissioner Boots' point, it isn't gonna hurt nothing. And if we're to that point, and if legal counsel, if Mr. DeGroat stands in front of us and says, guys, I just haven't had the time to, we just aren't there yet. I mean, I think we're just right where we're at tonight. We just let it go to
vote.
December. I mean, yeah, unfortunately, we're gonna waste 5 minutes talking about it. You're gonna have to listen to me, whatever, but.
But if we're going to advertise for public hearing, that's going to have to be 10 days before we do it. So if we were to advertise for the November meeting and not be able to do it, they would have to again re-advertise
Yeah.
that for the December date.
Or we have the public hearing and then.
We could have the public hearing.
Yep.
Which I think is good. For this topic, whenever we talk about it, I think it's good to have public hearing, so,
Mr. Chair?
yeah.
I guess my reasoning for November is, I remember my first meeting up here was a pipeline meeting, and it kind of keeps getting moved down the road, and obviously, it's due to elections and bills and stuff. I think everybody wants to try to get this put to
Agree.
bed sooner than later.
Yep.
I just afraid if we go to December,
Gets kicked down another month, and,
Yep.
yeah, before you know it, we're in February, and, yeah, I'm with you, Commissioner Boots. Like I said, I was 100% prepared to get with the program tonight maybe, but, I'm 100% in support. So, I guess unless there's any new thoughts and ideas, I'm ready to call the roll.
Yep, we're ready.
Okay, Commissioner Boots,
yes.
Commissioner Schmidt,
Yes.
Commissioner Jungling,
Yes.
Commissioner Sweeter,
No,
Commissioner Scott is also a yes, so it has been postponed to November. And with public comment, so. All right, very good. Now we'll move on to, the work session with the comprehensive plan update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, as I've communicated to you over the last few months, is that the staff has received a draft from our consultant on the comprehensive plan. And again, it's, as I mentioned before, it's kind of like a house build, is that, you see the foundation, but there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes and all that stuff. And one of the things that I wanted to bring before you is kind of a draft of some different policy that we're looking at than what's currently exists right now. And I'll kind of walk through that really quickly here. So the first thing I thought I'd point out is this is kind of important because this kind of sets the framework for what it is we're planning for. So what this chart shows is the historic census population, which is every 10 years. So the last census that was done was in 2020. And at that time, Lincoln County had a reported population of 65,161. So really what, we did a linear population estimate based on all of that census type growth. So as you can see, we're forecasting in 2050, which would be the time frame of this new comprehensive plan, so 2050 comprehensive plan, that we would have a projection of about 139,776 population. So that's about a 26% increase from 2040 to 2050 and a 25.9% increase from 2030 to 2040. And so one of the things that I've always heard is that how did we miss the population projection so bad in the current one? Where it shows us this type of a population estimate at that time, I think is like 50,000 or something at that point in time. And realistically, there's no science to population projections. I mean, there's some math associated with it, but really what you're looking at is historical population growth. So the one thing that I would say is, consistently, we're going to continue to see growth in that 25% range. And so what's important is not that we hit the number, but is that the framework, the policy, the leadership that we have all the way from staff to the planning commission to the board of commissioners is all based on the fact that we're estimating a population of 139,776. And when you think about what that number is, that's just a number of population, but that's not going to be the real thing that we see all the time, which is the transfer of agricultural property to development property. And so in order to get us to that population, that's quite a bit of conversion of land outside of our municipalities and within our county boundary borders. So it's important that when you look at that number is when you think about currently right now, the county with the county staffing is about 150 people. That number really hasn't changed over the years. But when we start looking at what realistically is 139,776 people, that's a lot of developed land, that's a lot of pressure on services, that's a lot of pressure on infrastructure that we're going to have to plan for. So that's the first step, is to really look at, that with that forecast, whatever it is, we need to start looking at the counties being that population. And so that's going to really affect our policy and our decision making. And then one of the other things that I showed here is, so we had a number of public hearings or open houses, and we had a number of stakeholder meetings. And what was something and this is something that staff internally talks about all the time too, is we heard this from every different level of public input we had. At every single meeting, they said Lincoln County is really three different parts. It's urbanizing on the north, and there's rural parts in the middle, which is the Worthings, the Lennox, and the Cantons. And then there's agriculture, which is to the southern part of the county. And when you really look at, when you go back to 1970 to today, the population's changed, but that framework has not changed. That's consistently been the way it's been. And so there's two parts to that. And why I shared that is, if you recall a couple of meetings back, we really unveiled kind of the goal that for the new comprehensive plan, and that's keep urban urban and keep rural rural. And so you all looked at me like, how are we going to do that, and how are we going to framework that together? So what I prepared to show you tonight is the proposal for policy for implementation that we would achieve that. So there's two parts to that. Is, land use planning is you want to forecast, but you also want to make sure that we're taking a look at what's good about Lincoln County right now so that we continue to strengthen those policies. And there's a benefit, a lot of times people say to me, well, what is Lincoln County, And so now I've been telling people what Lincoln County is many things. It's not just one little thing, it's not one advertisement. But the one thing that's important is we're urbanizing, we have a rural area, and we have an agricultural area. And that's pretty interesting when you consider that the largest city in the state of South Dakota is within our borders, right? So we're growing, and we're going to continue to grow. But with policy, we need to make sure that we're taking a look at that we're keeping the rural rural and that we're keeping the urban urban. And with that, the agricultural part of it too. And so the first thing that I would show you is that, so this is the new draft of the future land use map. And I did talk to you guys about this last month of essentially what the proposal would be. But essentially, the current comprehensive plan in a nutshell says two things. It says direct all growth to the municipalities and preserve agriculture. And that makes sense in the rural and agricultural part of the county, but everybody looks at me kind of cross-eyed when we say that in the north part, because that's not what's happened. It's not what's going to happen, correct? But the problem is that with that growth and with that, with that pressure is we're going to start getting pressure to put in the rural areas and put in the agricultural areas. And we really want to, direct growth to an area that can support it, that has the infrastructure, that has the road networks, that has it all planned out, and that more importantly has the tax base to support it. And that's your north end. And right now, just for some analysis to that is the city of Harrisburg has a current comprehensive plan. And as the other part of this I should have mentioned is that when we started updating our plan, nobody was updating their plan. Now everybody's updating their plan. The city of Sioux Falls, the city of the city of Harrisburg. And so it's kind of, we're all trying to figure out how this all works together. But the city of Harrisburg in their current comprehensive plan, and they're in the process of updating it, they're anticipating that within a 25 year time frame, they're going to be about 40 to 50,000 people. And when you think about that, that we're going to have in that metro area, metropolitan area, you're going to have 3 communities that are going to be the top 5 communities in the state of South Dakota at some point in planning time. And that's going to require, and you might say, well, growth just happens. Well, we know that growth doesn't just happen. It requires a lot of planning, and it requires a lot of implementation, and it requires a lot of thought to make sure that we don't lose the values and the importance of what we had now. But the other part about it is what's been challenging, and I know it's been challenging for staff, I know it's been challenging for the Planning Commission, the Board of Commissioners, and the public, is really how planning is supposed to work is there's really never a hard no. It's we don't want you here, but we want you here. And the current plan just does not accomplish that. It doesn't tell, when people come in our office and say, okay, well, we know you don't want us here, but where do you want us? And we can't facilitate that. And so really what this idea is, by creating a planned growth area, is number one, it's guiding development to those areas so that staff and so that the boards can work together to say, okay, this is a great area that we want you to be in. It's an area that's already planned. So the city of the city of Harrisburg, and the city of Sioux Falls have already established growth plans for what they want that area to be. It's really just us taking the leadership to implement those areas, to work with the cities to do that. And you're going to say, well, there's 2 ways you could do that. You could do that with joint jurisdiction. And I would say to you is that I think it's a challenging environment for joint jurisdiction if we don't have it now. Primarily because of the idea that, there's many that are going to say the joint jurisdiction we have with Sioux Falls, does it work effectively? Many of the landowners are going to say no because they don't have a voice in the election of those officials within the area. So it's unelected officials making decisions in those areas. And plus, what we notice is it's the coordination of it does take time. It does take effort. But with this idea, as proposed, the planned growth areas, number one, it's going to be planned. It's not going to be haphazard. It's not going to be undeveloped. It's going to be planned. And what that's going to mean is staff working directly with the cities to make sure that it's accomplishing the goals and the vision that they have for those areas. And the cities do have visions for those areas. But most importantly, it's the county taking the lead in that. From the beginning, it's the county saying is like, we're going to step up and we're going to work with the developers and we're going to work with that. We're not ping-ponging back and forth between cities. The county's the one that's going to take the leadership in that position. And then beyond that is these areas down south, which we've always had is these, what we currently call a rural commercial area, which if you look at how they've developed as city-type industrial park areas. But what we're really looking at in those areas is, especially those outlying areas, we want to make sure we work with the municipalities because those are direct interchanges into their municipalities. But we also want to take a look at what types of land uses, and this will be step 2 in the process is once the comprehensive plan gets updated, is we'll take a look at the zoning regulations, which is really the teeth of everything and the rules and regulations. We want to make sure that are we addressing that those areas should be developed with things that should be developed in a rural area. You know, elevators and seed sales and those types of things, as opposed to storage units and all the different types of things that could be in those areas. That's where we see the greatest pressure in development areas. But it's important, you know, I don't know if you've driven along the interstate, but if you've looked off to CHS, what they're doing on the Worthing exit, that's pretty impressive. They're currently pouring concrete for those silos 24 hours a day. That's a multi-million-dollar investment in Lincoln County and for the producers in this area for the value-added ag part of it. But that area, most people would say that's where that stuff should be, is where that's being built right there. So we need to make sure that, you know, land doesn't recreate itself. We need to put those types of uses in the areas that we think are more appropriate for those different types of land uses. And so with that, then, we've developed some policies to associate it with it. And so we currently do have for what I'll call growth areas types of development within the county. We're just going to rename those a little bit. And so the first thing is, again, this doesn't affect any existing development in these areas. This is all for future development and goals and policies that we'll utilize when we're making transitions of those land uses. So the first one would be agricultural areas. And again, even though we have some rapid urbanization in the north end, the largest land use in Lincoln County is agricultural. And even in 2050, the largest land use in Lincoln County is going to continue to be agricultural land uses. So that's what I'll call our biggest land use. But within that land use, we're going to take a look at what types of uses we want within there, what type of development that we want in there. And then we also have policies within there. And so if you look at these policies, most of these policies we took directly from the current comprehensive plan, so we're not recreating the wheel in any way with these policies. It's really just strengthening the idea that what we want in the agricultural areas, agricultural type uses, and those uses that are an enhancement to the agricultural community. And then the second one, which is really the most important one, is the one I showed you with the planned growth area. And that's really kind of two components to that is, so first and foremost, we're saying what should be is that we're gonna look towards those cities' comprehensive plans, and that would be Sioux Falls, T, and Harrisburg, to see what their land use guide is for that area. So is it residential, is it commercial, is it industrial, or is it some other type of land use? But then with that, once we've identified what they've identified in their comprehensive plan for what those land uses should be, the way that we're going to incorporate it is, so then if a landowner approaches us or a developer approaches us, we would make sure that it's compliant with those cities' guides or visions. And then to take that a step further is the policy would require that any change of zone in that area would require a planned development district. And you're familiar with planned development districts. We have a number of those in the county. And really what a planned development district is, it's a non-conventional zone. So it's not a typical commercial, or it's agricultural, commercial, light industrial, heavy industrial. So really the goal of that is, I know Chairman Scott always asks, is this compliant with the city's, zoning and future land use? And so most time I respond, no, it's not. But with a planned development district, we would incorporate the city's uses and restrictions into it, so it would be compliant. And so with that, we would also require that they would have a preliminary subdivision plan. I know the Board of Commissioners have always mentioned, that there's a two-headed dragon in planning and zoning in the state, where the county has jurisdiction over zoning, but the municipalities have jurisdiction over the subdivision of the property. So this policy would bring that into one under us, under the county. So we would make sure that when we receive a zoning application, it would have a subdivision plan that's already been approved by the cities. And county staff would work with the cities to make sure all of those requirements are in place and met. But essentially then, we would have development that's planned, that's consistent with what the county is and consistent with the city is. And I'm going to say, the Planning Commission knows why that's very important. in terms of annexation. One of the things that we've learned over the last, I'm going to say, few years is that how important annexation is for development in the county. Because what we see is a lot of times is the cities are just going to bypass it and it's going to stay under the jurisdiction of the county. That's just not a good use of resources, considering our sheriff would have to drive through city limits to get to an emergency in a county property that's essentially a complete donut island within the development area. So that's one thing, is to make sure that development's going to fit within the city. But it's also important that what this change does too is it takes a look at what that metropolitan area is, and it says, we know that's going to develop. We're just allowing that development to be consistent with the city, but to happen at a quicker pace than what the city has prepared for infrastructure with. And so, we see the pressure, staff sees the pressure, we know the pressure's there. But we just want to make sure that with that development that gets approved, it's consistent with what the city has and the county from that aspect too. And then the rural service area, again, as I previously mentioned, is we want to take a look at what those land uses are, but more importantly, we want to make sure that it's essentially not a piecemeal development, that we look at holistically from what the roadway networks are, the landscaping, and some of those different types of things. So that's all important to what we're seeing in development patterns. And then the last thing is the existing municipal areas, and so those are just the boundaries that are within the city corporate limits. So we just want to make sure that we recognize that, one, that we don't have any control over their planning and zoning activities, those are within, but it's important that we support those planning activities because we're the ones that are going to be approving development that's just outside of the city, so we want to make sure it's consistent with what the city has, so they can expand their city limits, but also so that those landowners can be a part of the city without any just seamless transitions there with that. So that's really kind of in a nutshell, a little bit about it. Hopefully you've had time to read through it. But I think one thing that I mentioned from the start of this, and what we've worked with the consultant is that the current policies are just too many, that we need to make it more simple so that everyone understands definitively what the policies are. But we also need to make sure that those policies are guiding towards what our primary goal is. And so really, and I'll start again, is what we heard in all the surveys and all the stakeholder meetings and all the public open houses and hearings that we had. The public really told us many things, but I'll summarize it in two things. Is that number one thing is they said is keep rural and keep urban. We want a distinction between those two. And then the number two thing they said is we want better communication and cooperation with the counties and the other jurisdictions such as the cities and things like that. And I think with these goals and policies and with that draft future land use map, I think 100% that this policy would abide by those, what the policies of what the goals of the public is. And I've said this before, and I think it's important, is that 1971 was the first year that Lincoln County adopted a comprehensive plan. And then we also adopted one in 2000, 2005. I'm going to say what was important to staff when we started this new process was we engaged the public. Because I think when you look back at those other plans, there wasn't a real engagement of the public. And again, back in those times, there wasn't a way. Now we made it pretty as easy as we could to make sure the public was engaged. But what's important to me is, and the staff and everybody in the county should be, is that our role in this process to implement this plan, because this is the community's plan, not ours. This isn't a top-down plan, this is a bottom-up plan. And the public has told us this is what we want. Now, is it 100% what the public wants? No. But is it what we heard from the public? Is what we've seen from the public? Is it what we've seen from the applications and the landowners out there? Yes. And so that's what's important, is that we make sure that we're carrying through that vision of what it is. And then really, the other thing is that what I look at the current comprehensive plan, and I don't think there's a lot of benchmarks. I don't think there's a lot of criteria of, are we meeting this? Is what we should be held accountable. Staff, the Planning Commission, the Board of Commissioners, are we accomplishing the things to implement this plan? Because really what the goal of this is we know we're going to have a population that's pretty significant, but is it a population and is it a development pattern that's consistent with what the public wants to see? And I've said before, it was a challenge for staff and the consultant to really come up with this framework, because that's difficult. With rapid urbanization, it's tough to make sure we're going to keep rural and keep urban. But with this, the foundation of Lincoln County is going to continue to be agriculture. But we're still going to have those policies to make sure that we've got development that's allowable, consistent, and it's going to continue to make us grow, but in the right places, in the smart places, in the best places for it. So with that, I'll pass it back to the chair, and I'll gladly answer any questions that you have. But really just looking for feedback from the board to how to, if you have any questions or any concerns or any changes to this policy. Otherwise, this kind of wraps up really what I'll call the policy-making part of it. The rest of the plan is really just kind of a snapshot of where we are today, which is just kind of analysis of the different issues within the county. But this is the meat of the comprehensive plan, which is the goals and policies, so. Thank you.
Thanks, Toby. Really appreciate the time and effort you put into it. Thanks for explaining it. Can you go back to the map? I had one question. I have two questions, but one involving the map. Would it be easier to just bring that whole thing down, flush it off with 116?
Yeah, no, great question. So that's possible, but that area there is the metropolitan planning area. That's a federally recognized area.
That's what?
Federally recognized area.
What do you mean by that? Explain that.
So because of our population, because of the metropolitan area, we're required by federal law to establish a MPO planning area. And that is the area right there.
That surrounds Sioux Falls, yeah.
Goes to the north, it goes up to the north as well. But that is the federally recognized metropolitan planning
That
area.
even goes into Iowa and
So
Minnesota.
you're saying that would could potentially supersede, but
No, I'm saying there's a reason for it though. Yeah, so if you go further south, I mean, then there's, and I think what we should take advantage of too, is since that is a federal area, is that we can receive funds to do different projects within that area, such as transportation improvements and things like that.
do you think it's gonna be hard? I mean, as you explain this to people in the future, I don't know, if I was sitting in your shoes and said, well, this all works 1 mile north of 116. That's how you're gonna explain it,
Yeah.
basically?
Yep.
But if you did, what you're saying is if you did bring it down to 116, like that wouldn't work?
No, it would work, it's just, it doesn't fit the narrative of the metropolitan planning area.
Okay.
But it's fine, I mean, we've talked about internally too, is you could move it down to 116,
Yeah.
but
I figured you had a reason for it, I was just curious. And then my second question would be is, so what's the go-forward plan with this now? Where
Yeah,
does
no.
it go, or how does that work?
So I think because this is policy, what the next step would be is I'm going to present this to the Board of Commissioners as well, just this information here. And then once we've got everybody's kind of acceptance or buy-in it or any changes we want, then we piece the rest of the plan together and just start adoption of it. So, because this is essentially the policy of it. The rest of it's just, what our school population is, what our environmental constraints are, and kind of again, really just an analysis of where we're at today with the other items.
Very good. Commissioner Schmidt? Looks like you have a
Toby,
question, comment?
It's a rather sobering thought to think that 2050, we'll have about 140-plus thousand people in our county. And what we've heard is we want to keep rural, and urban. And what concerns me is we're a 40-40 county. So we have 40 building sites or potential on every quarter. And if you were to, I can't tell you how many phone calls that I get asking people for, do you know of a building site in the country? Anybody want to sell 3 acres? Anybody want to sell 5 acres? Our challenge is, and I'm guilty to the fact that years ago, I voted that a person could move their eligibilities into one area. So if they had land and they owned several quarters, technically, they could take all of those potential eligibilities and glob them together. And to me, that is what our challenge will be, is to try and limit, and it said limit housing on one of the bullet points. The challenge will be, how do we maintain that situation without really completely dotting the rural countryside when you got that many people and that much pressure to move into the country. I think that's going to be our challenge. And if we could go back, I would never vote for, I'd vote for keeping eligibilities on the land and not being able to move them and put them into one specific area. I think we're creating subdivisions potentially. We haven't yet, but it's all out there potentially to do that. And in some areas we have. So that's one of the concerns that I really have, because we have a beautiful county. If you drive through this county, I don't think you can go anywhere. But when you go into the southern part of our county and you see the rolling hills and you see how well homesteads are maintained, it's something you can feel proud of. I do. I feel very proud and honored to be able to serve as a commissioner. And to try to preserve that is really going to be a challenge. And I think planning and zoning boards are going to have a tough time. And I think future commissioners are going to have a tough time to try and hold the line and maintain that ag base. I'll get off my soapbox now.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner Schmidt. Anyone else? Any questions for Toby? Comments? Commissioner Jungling?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have anything for Toby directly, except for thank you again for this. I mean, putting this policy in there really, I think, finishes it up, puts a bow on it, if you want to call it that. I want to learn a little bit more about it, do a little bit more studying, but I think this is what us as a planning commission been looking for years with our decisions and everything. This is the way we've been going. To address Commissioner Schmidt a little bit, housing eligibilities and all that out in the country, I understand, get them all together. I don't know if that's right or not, but my concern is when we start doing other things out in the country, spot zoning, other things that are out there that causes big challenges for cities when they get out there or are forced to move out there to bring water services and all that to them when that area is not ready. So that's my biggest concern, and I hope we get this all addressed with this new policy.
Yeah, I mean, I would just address the residential part of it is that, yeah, I mean, the building eligibilities has been a challenge. I mean, it's been a challenge to implement, it's been a challenge to utilize. I mean, there's been a lot of challenges with it. And I think the biggest challenge is it's just not advertised. I mean, nobody knows where they are and nobody knows who has them, and there isn't really a set cost. I mean, it just varies on the day, that part of it. What we see though is, and you see it is, in that area that's the planned growth area, we've had a lot of applications to change the zone to rural residential. And the argument is, look, all around it, you know, it's when we show you the pictures on here, there's yellow all around up there. And so the question is do you allow those to expand? Do you allow those to continue to grow? Because there's pressure for that type of land use. The commercial industrial is really a challenge because a lot of commercials independent of, you know, they need roofs. They need people. You can't put a gas station out when you only got 30 cars driving by every day. I mean, you need some significant traffic there. The industrial part of it, the challenge there is they need city services. They need sewer. They need the water from the cities and to develop those types of things. The residential, there's a huge demand for that because a lot of people, Sioux Falls is getting big, the other cities are getting big. And then I always, you know, I tell our colleagues in the cities that, well, you know, you don't allow people to keep a boat or a camper in their yards, so they almost got to move out in the country and put up a big shed, you know. But
Come to Lincoln County and do it.
so the challenge has been though is we've held the line is that we've said no to some of these, and even some of them are, you know, we've had one this year where I think they wanted to put 3 houses on, you know, on a lot, and the city wasn't supportive of it, and they came to the meeting and were supportive of it, and the applicant, of course, was okay with it. The problem was our current plan said no. It just really said we don't allow that type of a thing. And even though these people are saying, well, we bought this land because we drove out here and looked at it, and we're like, look at all the houses around here. The county's gonna let us do that. And so, staff, we talk about that quite a bit, is we know we're becoming bigger when people don't talk to us. They just buy land and then come to us and say, here's our forgiveness, can we do what we want to do? And so we need a plan that's going to show those people before they buy land, this is where we want you, this is where we want to be at. The challenge with all types of growth is that, it's land availability, it's land cost. And so the further that you go out, the cheaper, of course, the land would be with those aspects. And so what we're really proposing, to answer kind of Commissioner Spitz's question, is that area, the planned growth area, we would be entertaining rezones to rural residential in those areas, as long as it's consistent with what the cities see. And so I did last week, I did meet with the City of T staff and the City of Harrisburg staff and shared with them the same presentation and the ideas and the policies and things like that. And they were very supportive of what it was. And again, that's staff, so I'm not going to speak for their elected officials. But they said the same thing that in the back of my mind, I thought, this is going to bring us together. This is going to allow us to be on the same page of stuff. The last thing we want is to not be on the same page, because this is Lincoln County. It might be the City of T, the City of Harrisburg, and City of Sioux Falls, but we're all building Lincoln County here. This border, this establishment, that's not going to change. That was established many, many years ago, and we were incorporated, and that is our boundary, that is Lincoln County. But it's important that we, within that area, it's planned, that we can entertain rezones for rural residential in those areas, and it's going to be attractive development, it's going to be in areas where they're going to be desirable. But beyond that, in those areas, and I'll say even down to 116, the planning's not there, the infrastructure's not there to develop it. But we know in those northern areas and things like that, we know that the cities have it planned, and we know we can work to achieve those plans, which is important.
But, and I think too, Toby, the thing that, and you watch us struggle with it almost on a monthly basis is, maybe that makes some sense, but prematurely, we don't want to see residents get houses built and 10 to 20 years later, all of a sudden have to hook up to city sewer, city water, put curb and gutter in, all these things, and be kind of blindsided by them. But it looks to me like by this plan, that would all be up front. And that way people aren't taken by surprise and they know what they're signing up for. And I think that's the super important part about it. And it's the thing we tasked you with, is like, yeah, we're all for this. It'd make, I think, everybody's life easier, so people are asking for. But we gotta everybody's gotta get on the same page so that some poor young couple that buys a house up by Spring Creek, and 10 years later, they realize, well, now I gotta spend $200,000 on curb and gutter and hook my sewer up to the front of my house instead of the back, right? And so if we can get out ahead of that, I think it makes perfect sense.
Well, I think, the other thing I look at is we're very, we're very communicative with both rural water systems in the county. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that they consistently say is, hey, this isn't cheap for us to run a line, right? Mm-hmm. But we don't want to run a line here and there and everywhere. We would rather, we know where you want us to go with, where you're going to go with development, then we can plan for that. Yep. And I'll say the same thing for the cities. The city can and will extend infrastructure beyond their corporate limits. But they're going to want to know where's those areas going to be, as opposed to where they're not going to be. Yep. So it's going to require a lot of coordination. And number one, this is a 2050 vision. And I'm not saying this is going to be perfect and be implemented right away, because we've had a number of landowners contact us, when are you going to adopt this? Because we'd really like to do this, we'd really like to follow this process.
I bet you have.
Yeah. But with that is, there's going to be some framework and some additional policies and things that we're going to have to implement down the road. Really what this is our big dream. This is our vision of what we want this county to be. And irregardless if you do a planned growth area in that area or not, in 2050, that area will be mostly developed, right? The cities, but it'll be the cities expanding out.
Right.
And so, so I should say, 90% of our population currently at that 66,000 is within the cities, right? The majority of it is, and the majority in 2050 with the 130-some thousand, that'll be within the cities, the majority of it. But the bigger those cities get, the bigger the pressure, the bigger the demand for growing outside the cities and for people going outside the cities and doing that. And there's some fabulous developments. I say this all the time, is that Lincoln County gets better every year. I mean, when you drive through some of the new developments that we're developing in the last 5 years and things like that, they don't have any issues. They're developed and they're planned and they're what I'll call infrastructured well. And so they're going to be turnkey operations. We make sure that the roads are dedicated, that there's right of way and things like that. So we've learned, I mean, there are a lot of the things that, you know, if you're going to continually, we can all point to the things that happened in the past, but that's not the way we do it today. It's changed, it's better. And Lincoln County is better than what it is today. It's more attractive and there's other things that are there. But with that, we need to make sure that we do our role to make sure that we maintain those three things. And that's really what we talked about in that cover is really, you know, a lot of people always say, when you look at comprehensive plans, they'll always say grow, you know, and shape and build and all this other stuff. What we really settled on is that it's about connecting. It's about making sure that we connect the municipalities, that we connect these areas, these rural areas and these urbanizing areas. And with that connection, we make it stronger. When we have one Lincoln County, instead of continually talking about that there's 3 different Lincoln counties, we make Lincoln County better. So it's working together. It's doing the things we need to do, especially in the municipalities. I mean, they've got growth plans, they've got everything. We just need to work with them and they work with us too. So, but with that requires us taking the leadership, and that's going to be a challenge. I mean, we've had issues. We're going to continue to have issues, but we want to solve those issues before they become real problems. But when you think about the things we deal with today, think about almost tripling our population from what it is today. That doesn't get easier. It gets more challenging with the things that we need to solve. But that's why we continually say our goal is to connect and to lead Lincoln County. So with that, again, I'll turn it back to the chair.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Any other comments, questions?
I'll just throw out there too to say thanks, Toby, for putting all this together, and I can echo the one thing that you said. I talked to Justin a little bit in T today, and they like the direction of this, just the communication. So, and just like you said, the county has gotten better, and one thing I always look at that was brought up at a meeting I was at was there's a reason the windshield's the size it is and the rearview mirror is the size it is. We can't look backwards. We're moving forward, and as you said, we've gotten better at moving forward, so.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner Boots. Anyone else?
Representative Lems, I say this tongue in cheek. Could you ever get a license plate for Lincoln County called 2.5? Because I think we're that close to beating Pennington County.
All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Thank you.
All right, I think with that, we will, we'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Make a motion to adjourn, Jungling.
Second, Sweeter.
Been moved and properly seconded. All in favor, aye? Aye. All opposed, same sign. Meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody.